We wear fiber clothing, we wear metal jewelry, eat with metal spoons, we have glass cups. We have a really intimate relationship with craft materials, particularly because they're used to sustain the body or adorn the body. And I think that really has been the kind of conceptual underpinning of my work. My practice has generally been a combination of making objects using craft-based material. I'm rooted in jewelry and metalsmithing. That was my fundamental training, but I've expanded that to include ceramics and glass and fibers, among many other things. So I use those objects in performance images and photographs. The work that's installed for contemporary craft is part of a body of work that is titled To Have or to Hold, or abbreviated to just Hold. Comes from traditional marriage vows. To have or to hold until death do us part. I've left off the death do us part, it's implied. The objects are set on tables, these tables that sort of look something like a dining room table, and that's really key to the reading of the work. I want my objects to be interpreted as domestic objects. They are these sort of vessel-like forms. They have a vase-like opening, but they also are distorted and sort of blobby. As you approach the tables, it becomes clear that what is distorting them and what's making them blobby is that they've been held by the body. And so you can start to make out a handprint or a face print. It starts to put together the landscape of an entire body as you move through the objects on the table. The glass work that I made for the exhibition started with some experiments with ceramics, where I was throwing large-scale vessels, about 2 feet tall, and while they're still wet, holding them, so picking them up. And what happens is they imprint with the body. In holding these vessels, I was thinking about them kind of being proxy bodies. They kind of become a stand-in for another form. They're about the same width as another body, but in the holding and kind of cradling, that I'm also distorting them. So it's like sort of like loving something so much that you smother it, right? Or wanting something so badly and it just falls through your fingers, or quite literally presses through your fingers. And so they become this sort of archive of something lost. And this work came out of the pandemic, and I can't say that it was like, oh, I'm gonna make work about loss, but that was, I think, how I was feeling and where I was at in my studio practice. And it very much is about trying to kind of regain connection or think about lost connection. And so that's where the glass work kind of landed, are these sort of negative spaces, these empty spaces, representing something that's not there anymore. This really was a leap of faith and trusting other people to help me in the process. So that started with the mold making. Because of the scale of the molds, I couldn't make them myself on my own body. So I had to work with skilled professionals to make that happen. And it is, I think, a very vulnerable experience. I like to be the director, and this really kind of forced me to step back. I have to say it was like a really wonderful experience because it allowed me to do things I just could not possibly do on my own. And I learned a ton. I was in Philadelphia at independent casting for about a week, and I think the actual kind of me under rubber was maybe 3 or 4 days, 3.5 days long, kind of 8-hour days. So the process of making the molds for each body part, let's say I was doing a leg, that would take about 1 hour to 1.5 hours start to finish. So in terms of mold making, it's relatively fast, but in terms of standing without moving, it feels kind of like an eternity. I took those molds back to my studio, cast full body plasters, and then took those to the studio at the Corning Museum of Glass. And there I was working with two really amazing skilled gaffers, Darren Dennison and Ross Delano, to help make these blown forms that it would take me decades to be able to learn the skills to do that. It was just a brilliant experience and completely expanded my work and changed how I thought about making my work. I now am much more excited about working with other people. There is something about craft right now that feels really kind of important and maybe urgent. As a teacher, I've seen my students really being drawn to the craft mediums post-pandemic because of that sort of tactility of the objects, but also the kind of communal atmosphere of a craft-based studio. There really is, I think, there is something in us that desires to kind of make things and touch things. And I think that craft does that. I also think that craft teaches us about our built environment. In a world where things are increasingly made in factories that we don't see, through techniques we don't understand, actually learning how to make something gives us a real tangible connection to the built environment. And I think these spaces are really kind of crucial and really quite unique in that way. In our world, we're increasingly experiencing things through a screen.